It feels like there's going to be a lot of storylines over the next few weeks at the quarterback position. Does Joe Flacco salvage fantasy seasons for Ja'Marr Chase and T. Higgins? When will Lamar Jackson be back? Brock Purdy or Mac Jones? Who will Kyle Shanahan roll with when both of them are healthy? Luckily though, we got a lot of other good options that you can roll with this week, especially considering the two quarterbacks that we're missing are CJ Stroud and Carson Wentz. This week, we should be okay at the quarterback position. And Thursday Night Football is going to showcase Jalen Hurts and the rookie Jackson Dart. And hopefully this is a fun one to watch with a couple of dynamic playmakers at the quarterback position. And for Jalen Hurts, we've got him as a start. Last week, a season high in passing yards. And he's got 7 touchdowns and 0 interceptions over the last 3 games. At the beginning of the season, I mentioned it. They're not doing much in the passing game. He's been picking it up as of late. And the New York Giants also allow the 9th most rushing yards to opposing quarterbacks. Jalen Hurts has a solid ceiling this week. Jackson Dart will be a fringe start in this matchup. Last week he got off to another really good start, but he ended up finishing the game with 2 interceptions and a fumble. 3 turnovers is a really good way to lower your ceiling, but luckily, because of what he does with his legs, he does help keep that propped up a little bit and at least has a solid floor because of it. But he also threw the ball 40 times last week, and you gotta wonder if he's gonna do that again. I would expect them to be more around 30. Bo Nix and Justin Fields on Sunday morning, and Bo Nix hopefully is gonna start finding a little bit more of his upside moving forward. The New York Jets are currently allowing the 6th most fantasy points per game to opposing quarterbacks, but they are allowing the 12th fewest passing yards. The biggest thing is they haven't created an interception, and they've allowed 11 passing touchdowns already. If we can add a couple more to those 11 with Bo Nix, he should be a solid play this week. I'm cautiously optimistic about Justin Fields this week. Now, going up against this Denver defense is not going to be easy. They allow the 3rd fewest fantasy points per game, and they've only allowed 4 passing touchdowns this season, tied for the 2nd fewest. But the biggest stat here that worries me about this week is that they've only allowed 15 rushing yards to opposing quarterbacks. But it's not like they've been facing guys that just stand in the pocket. So far this season, they have faced Cam Ward, Daniel Jones, Justin Herbert, and Jalen Hurts. All of those guys are known for getting outside the pocket and creating yards with their legs, something Justin Fields has to do to reach his ceiling. Kyler Murray and Daniel Jones, kind of the epitome of up and down careers at this point. And for Kyler Murray, he's got a little bit of a foot sprain, it sounds like. He did return last week, and I don't expect him to miss this week, but we are going to mention it just in case. But going up against the Indianapolis Colts, they're currently allowing the 7th fewest fantasy points per game to opposing quarterbacks. But they're allowing the 10th most passing yards. And that's because they've created 6 turnovers via interception already this season. Murray has not been a quarterback 1 all year long. He's been the QB 16, 22, 16, 16, and 19. At least he's staying consistent. For Daniel Jones against Arizona, are we starting to see a little bit of a downfall at this point? Is he going to start reverting back to the way he played in New York? A lot of people were super excited about how he did to begin the season, and I give him props for that. But we need to see him get back to playing that type of football. This week going up against Arizona, allowing the 5th fewest fantasy points per game to opposing quarterbacks, and they've only allowed 5 passing touchdowns. One of the reasons why their points are so low, but they have allowed the 4th most passing yards. So there's an opportunity for Daniel Jones. And after 3 weeks as a top 12 quarterback, he's only been the QB 26 and 16 over the course of the last 2 weeks. He also has 3 touchdowns and 2 interceptions over that time. And he only has 2 rushes for 1 yard over the last couple of weeks. He's not showing any ability with his legs right now. One of the reasons why I just said he needs to get back to what he was doing at the beginning of the season. And he could do that this week against Arizona, but it still makes him a risky bet. To begin the season, it really felt like Justin Herbert may be putting himself in the MVP conversation very early. But after 4 interceptions the last 3 weeks, his upside has definitely taken a big hit. This week going up against Miami, who allows the 3rd most fantasy points per game, even though they're only middle of the road when it comes to passing yards allowed. And that's because they've only created 1 interception. Plus, they've allowed 4 rushing touchdowns to opposing quarterbacks, which is the most. Could Justin Herbert find the end zone with his legs this week? I think that's a possibility. For Tua, I originally listed him as a fringe start, but after I looked at it a little bit more, I decided to just go ahead and sit him this week. I know he's coming off a really solid week. 256 yards and 3 touchdowns last week, and it's the first time that he's been a top 12 quarterback all season long. But I'm not in love with this matchup. It is a difficult matchup to buy into for a guy that for a majority of the year and for what feels like a while has had trouble finding his upside on a consistent basis. The best thing for Tua this week would be Los Angeles getting out in front early, playing from ahead, and putting them in negative game script, causing Tua to throw the ball 35 times this week. Then he may hit his ceiling. Drake Maye gets to continue his breakout campaign against the New Orleans Saints defense this week, who's currently allowing the 7th most fantasy points per game, and they're tied for the 3rd most touchdowns allowed to opposing quarterbacks. Now, last week, Drake Maye was only the QB 23, but that does not take away from the fact that he played extremely well from just a pure football standpoint. And he made some throws that clearly indicate that this guy is coming very close to taking a step to the next level, if he hasn't already done so. For Drake Maye this week, I think he gets back into that conversation. He had 3 straight games as a top 8 quarterback before last week, and he could be back there once again. I've been giving Spencer Rattler his props over the last couple of weeks because he is a very solid QB2. He has been inside the top 24 every single game this season, and he's limiting interceptions as well. He hasn't thrown an interception in 4 of 5 games this week. But this week, I think we could end up seeing that streak of QB2s not continue. I think going up against New England this week, who has been vastly improved since week 2 of the season, a QB2 performance for Spencer Rattler is more of a ceiling than a floor now. I will say this, Dillon Gabriel looked very solid last week. He completed 19 of 33 passing attempts for 190 yards, 2 touchdowns, and didn't throw an interception. And now he's getting a Pittsburgh defense that currently is allowing the 4th most fantasy points per game to opposing quarterbacks. But the thing about Dillon Gabriel is he makes the throws that he's supposed to, but he's not really doing anything more than that. And it could take some time for him and Jerry Jeudy, Isaiah Bond, David Njoku, Harold Fannin to really get things going. The good thing so far is Quinshon Judkins has been very good at the running back position, which is allowing Dillon Gabriel a little bit less pressure on himself to make things happen. Does he have an opportunity to be a decent quarterback too for a super flex or a 2 QB league? Absolutely, but QB1 upside I think is out of the question right now. Aaron Rodgers does have a tougher matchup this week, but I don't think that's going to keep him from finding his floor. He hasn't had the highest ceiling yet this season, but I do think coming out of the bye, they could play particularly well going up against Cleveland. Now, Cleveland is allowing the 8th fewest fantasy points per game to quarterbacks, the 7th fewest passing yards, but they have allowed 9 passing touchdowns, which bodes well for Aaron Rodgers to possibly find the end zone a couple of different times. After being the QB7 back in week 1, he's only been the QB 24, 24, and 23. So once again, bank on the floor, not the ceiling. Dak Prescott is on some crazy tear the last couple of weeks, and that's without CeeDee Lamb. He's been the QB1 and the QB3 the last 2 weeks with 7 total touchdowns. And going up against this defense, the numbers show that Carolina allows the 10th fewest fantasy points per game to opposing quarterbacks. But Tua threw for 250 yards and 3 touchdowns last week against this team. Bryce Young had a solid matchup last week, didn't do a whole lot with it. This week he gets another solid matchup with Dallas allowing the most fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks. But when he faced Miami last week, who allows the 3rd most, he still had trouble finding his ceiling. He also has 5 turnovers this season, including interceptions and fumbles. Turning the ball over, not reaching his ceiling in good matchups. Bryce Young just does not look like the same quarterback that was playing well at the end of last season. But because of the matchup, I gotta put him at fringe start. Sam Darnold has been a top 10 quarterback each of the last 2 weeks, including the QB2 last week. Jacksonville is basically middle of the road when it comes to everything quarterbacks. And with as well as Sam Darnold is playing right now, I am going to list him firmly as a start. And maybe this shocks you after what happened last week with the Jacksonville Jags pulling off the upset over the Kansas City Chiefs. but I've got Trevor Lawrence as a sit this week. Right now, really, his numbers last week are propped up based by 2 rushing touchdowns. He only has 1 game with more than 1 passing touchdown this season. He's got 5 interceptions, 6 passing touchdowns. That's not a great ratio. And I promise you, banking on Trevor Lawrence to try and score a rushing touchdown every week is not something we want to do. Matthew Stafford has a huge ceiling this week. Over the last couple of weeks, he's been the QB2 and the QB6. He's finding his groove and he's finding that upside that he didn't quite have to begin the year. And now he gets a Baltimore team allowing the second most fantasy points per game, the second most passing yards, and the most passing touchdowns. Lock Stafford in for a top 10 week. Unfortunately, we're not going to get Stafford versus Lamar Jackson, which would have been an awesome quarterback matchup. Cooper Rush expected to get the start once again. 3 interceptions on 20 passing attempts last week. If you're even considering starting this guy, you should probably just stick to pick'ems on underdog. Cam Ward had some insane throws last week, and he played well enough to lead Tennessee back for an upset of the Arizona Cardinals. You also could argue that the Cardinals kind of gave that game away too, but that's the type of growth that you look for in a rookie quarterback. And even though we're seeing that type of growth in the field, it hasn't translated into fantasy points. So good for him. Keep it up, but he's not going to be on our lineups anytime soon. Geno Smith looks terrible right now. 5 interceptions over his last 2 games, 9 total on the season. That's killing his upside, and it's killing the upside for his team. And you can bet we're going to see a ton of Ashton Genty this week, but they are still going to have to throw the ball. And even though I have Geno Smith listed as a sit, and I want nothing to do with him, it still doesn't mean that he can't get the ball to Myers and Tucker enough this week to make them fantasy viable. It just means that they have lower ceilings, especially if he turns the ball over again. Joe Flacco is like a cat, which makes sense that he's with the Cincinnati Bengals now. But this guy gets another life? How many NFL lives does he have? And does he help turn another season around like he's done for the Browns before? Even though he didn't really help him out that much this season. He's got to be better than Jake Browning, right? And Jake Browning was announced. He's going back to the bench. Joe Flacco will be the starter this week. Joe Flacco getting traded to Cincinnati is going to save his season and maybe give him just a little bit extra here at the end of his career, which means he doesn't have to get the golf clubs out as early this season. He can keep them put away, but when it's time to get them out, he's going to be having Caddy Splash help him get his clubs clean and looking great on the golf course all the time. And our friends over at Caddy Splash have been sponsoring our quarterback videos all season long. And you know what you should do? You should go check out all of the awesome products that they have over there right now. I've got a few things of theirs in my bag myself, and even though I haven't made it out on the golf course a ton, I've always got Caddy Splash with me to help. Their cleaning tools to help you keep your clubs looking spectacular all year long, during and after every single round, are a must-have for your golf bag. And I've got a decent pair of clubs, not the best ones in the world, but I spent a decent chunk on some Callaway clubs quite a few years back. And by using Caddy Splash, it helps them keeping looking brand new over and over. And for our listeners and community right now, you can get 15% off of your order over at Caddy Splash. Use the link down in the description below or head on over to their website and use code HEADLINERS when you check out. And if you do order something this week from Caddy Splash, let me know, because I want to hear your experience with them, because mine's been excellent. And yeah, I'm not going to roll with Flacco this week, even though I really do hope that he can get Ja'Marr Chase and T. Higgins at least fantasy viable on a weekly basis. But I will be rolling with Jordan Love. This is a fantastic matchup for him. Cincinnati, after facing Jared Goff and the Lions last week, getting Green Bay on the road, allowing the 10th most fantasy points per game, 3rd most passing yards, and they've allowed 11 passing touchdowns, 3rd most in the league. Coming out of the bye, I have to bet that the Packers are going to be raring and ready to go, and right before the bye, Jordan Love was the QB6 against Dallas. For San Francisco, it appears that they are going to be missing Brock Purdy once again this week. Now, I left his name in here just in case something were to happen at the end of the week, and then everyone would be asking, well, what do we do with Brock? And with the way NFL treats injuries now, we just never know when someone's going to come back, be fully healthy, be out. It's just a crapshoot these days. So Brock Purdy and Mac Jones this week. Unfortunately, I'm going to end up sitting both of them. And you might be asking why, especially if it's Mac Jones with how well he's been playing. Right now, Tampa Bay is allowing the 5th most fantasy points to quarterbacks. It's because they've allowed 10 passing touchdowns. But some of those numbers are recently inflated because of how Sam Darnold did against this defense last week. Now, Tampa Bay did allow a fair amount of yards to Michael Penix back in week 1, but CJ Stroud and Jalen Hurts both had trouble reaching their ceilings going up against this Tampa Bay defense as well. Now, Mac Jones could end up moving to a fringe start for me, but we need to know more about the pass catchers because as of right now, has Jauan Jennings returned to practice? Yes, but he's not a full participant. Ricky Pearsall has not returned to practice, and it still sounds like George Kittle could end up missing another week, but we're waiting to hear about that one as well. Baker Mayfield has been a top 12 quarterback in 4 of 5 games this season. He's been one of the most consistent fantasy producers all season long. Maybe he doesn't reach a super high ceiling every single week, but he sure as heck has a really solid low-end QB1 floor. The fantasy points allowed by Kansas City to opposing quarterbacks may look a little skewed right now, and that's because Trevor Lawrence had 2 rushing touchdowns last week, but they are allowing the 9th fewest passing yards to opposing quarterbacks. Does Jared Goff have a huge ceiling in this matchup? No, he doesn't. He's only been a top 12 quarterback 1 time this season. Does he have a solid floor though? Absolutely he does, because he continues to find himself in the top 24. Patrick Mahomes definitely has a shot at finding his ceiling this week, and one of the reasons why he keeps finding his ceiling is because of the rushing yards. He has the 4th most rushing yards among quarterbacks right now. Also in this matchup, the Detroit Lions are going to be missing their top 2 cornerbacks. DJ Reed and Terrion Arnold both are missing significant time right now with injuries. They may be back at some point this season, but as of right now, we're going to be facing backups. For our first Monday Night Football matchup, Buffalo and Atlanta, and it sounds like Josh Allen may be dealing with a little bit of a knee sprain. Nothing we need to be significantly worried about though. It will be interesting to see how this matchup goes though and how mobile he is, because I think he has an opportunity to take advantage of Atlanta on the ground. They're allowing the 4th fewest fantasy points per game to opposing quarterbacks, and we know this defense has been better this year, and they're causing more pressure on the quarterback than what they have in previous seasons. And when that happens, Josh Allen can play outside the pocket and he can pick up yards on the ground. Michael Penix has seen some high highs and some low lows this season. Back in week 1, he was the QB10, and then he went on a stretch where you couldn't even trust this offense. And then last week, he was back to QB12 before the bye. Hopefully, that can continue. And I don't know if he's a top 12 quarterback this week. Not a big fan of the matchup. But if this game can stay more neutral or negative for Atlanta, Michael Penix should keep throwing the ball. Coming out of the bye, we are going to roll with Caleb Williams as a start in the second Monday Night Football matchup against Washington. Washington's defense right now allowing the 9th most fantasy points per game and the 8th most passing yards to opposing quarterbacks. Just like I said a second ago with Michael Penix. Some high highs and some low lows. Caleb Williams has been the QB9 this season. He's been in the top 10 QBs twice, but he's also been QB20 and QB24 as well. I think he's got top 12 potential this week, though. Jayden Daniels absolutely has a very high ceiling this week as well. We know this Bears defense has had trouble against quarterbacks all season long, allowing the 8th most fantasy points per game. And even though they were on the bye last week and have only played 4 games this season, they've allowed 10 passing touchdowns. And Daniels looked solid in his return last week. He completed 15 of 26 passes, 231 yards, and a touchdown, and he ran the ball 8 times, which we were worried about if he was dealing with an injury. But he's got that high upside once again going up against Chicago. Headliner Nation, that's going to do it for all of the start and sit videos this week. If you've missed any of them, make sure you go back to the playlist and find the start and sit videos, or go back to recent uploads and you'll find them there as well. And start getting all the information that you need to make decisions this week. For now, Headliner Nation, I'm going to get out of here. Hit the like button. Make sure you subscribe to the channel and turn on the bell notification so anytime we drop new content, you'll get to it right away. See you later. Stay safe, stay healthy. I'll catch you on the next episode of the Fantasy Headliners.